Hello, hello, good evening, everyone. I did not receive.
A very fine good evening to one and all. I'm Jomul J, State Chapter Member, Law and Justice Research Foundation. I extend warm and hearty welcome to each and everyone present in this webinar. Today is a day of great importance to all Indians. This is the day we celebrate our freedom as a nation. India is celebrating her 75th Independence Day today. This freedom uh, is that we are enjoying today is the result of many brave hearts, and this is the result of sacrifice of many brave hearts. They lost their life for our freedom, and this freedom doesn't mean that we have the right to do or we have the freedom to do whatever we want. We have to enjoy our freedom according to the laws of our country and rules of according to the rules. So as an Indian citizen, it is highly important that we should respect our nation and we should respect our constitution. So now we all are here For our fourth lecture in the B.R. Ambedkar Memorial Lecture Series on the topic Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's contribution to Indian independence through the Constitution of India, organized by Law and Justice Research Foundation, Trivandrum chapter in collaboration with Mandava Science Foundation, Bangalore. Before moving into the program, I would like to remind you that please keep your microphones muted and none of you get engaged in any kind of presentations while our speakers are taking the session. So I invite Ms. Uttara, LGRF Trivandrum chapter member and 3-year LLB student, Mar Gregorius Law College, for comparing this session. Over to you, Uttara.
Thank you so much, Jomol. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. A very hearty good evening to each and everyone here today. Myself, Uttara, law student Mar Gregorius Law College, and also a member in LGRF Trivandrum chapter. Before we commence with our today's program, I wish each and everyone a happy Independence Day on my behalf and also on behalf of everyone at LGRF family. Paying a moment of gratitude and respect to each and every single person who fought for the nation's freedom. Each one of us will always be indebted to you for what you have gained for us. They cannot create history who forget history, says B.R. Ambedkar. Though India became a free nation on 15th August 1947, it enjoyed the true spirit of independence on 26 January 1950 when the Constitution of India came into force. The Constitution gave the citizens of India the power to govern themselves and choose their own government. Indian Constitution being the biggest and the longest written constitution in any sovereign country in the world, how could we forget the architect behind it? Today, we have all assembled here to be a part of the fourth session of the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Memorial Lecture Series conducted by Law and Justice Research Foundation in collaboration with the Mandava Science Foundation. Our today's session will be on the topic Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's contribution to India's independence through the Constitution of India. For welcoming you all officially, I invite Mr. Chindu Joseph, President LGRF Trivandrum Chapter. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Sarah. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Respected.
I'm sorry, sir, we can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Is it audible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Respected Dr. C. Basavaraju, Dr. Sindhu Tulasidaran, Mr. Deepak Sharavanan, Advocate G. Muralidharan, LGRF State and Trivandrum Chapter officials, LGRF members, officials and other personalities from Mandava Science Foundation, Bangalore, and all others who are presented here, a very good evening and a happy 75th Independence Day of our nation. I am Advocate Chindu Joseph, PhD Research Scholar, Department of Law, Central University of Kerala, and also serve as the President of the LGRF Trivandrum Chapter, Supervisor of the Teachers Development Program, Editor at lawexams.co.in, and member, Constitutional Literacy Center, Chirayankeedu. It's actually a moment of pride and happiness to start this wonderful occasion of the fourth lecture of the Ambedkar Memorial Lecture Series conducted by the LGRF Trivandrum Chapter in association with Mandava Science Foundation, Bangalore, in this prominent day of our independence. I consider it as my privilege to get an opportunity to deliver the welcome address in today's lecture. In this day of the 75th year of our independence, it feels good to have a look at what Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, have to say about the independence of our nation, or his views and concerns about the independence achieved by our nation and its future. He said, independence is no doubt a matter of joy, but let us not forget that this independence has thrown on us a greater responsibility. By independence, we have lost the excuse of blaming the British for anything going wrong. If hereafter things go wrong, we will have nobody to blame except ourselves. There is a greater danger of things going wrong. Times are fast changing. He also stated that his concern was that will history repeat itself? It is this thought which fills me with anxiety. This anxiety is deepened by the realization of the fact that in addition to our old enemies, that is in the form of British, we have new enemies in the form of caste and creed. We are going to have many political parties with diverse and opposing political creeds. His concern was, will Indians place the country above their creed, or will they place creed above country? I'll repeat, will Indians place the country above their creed, or will they place creed above country? And he seems helpless. He says, I don't know. But this much is certain. If the political parties place creed above our country, our independence will be put in jeopardy a second time and probably be lost forever. This eventuality we must all resolutely guard against. And he urges each and every citizen that we must be determined to defend ourselves, our independence, with the last drop of our blood. And at this juncture, I would like to start welcoming the respected personalities we have today with us in this lecture. To start with, today's presidential address will be delivered by Dr. Sindhu Tulasidaran, Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Law, University of Kerala. I was fortunate enough to be a student in the department while I was pursuing LLM. And ma'am has instantly accepted our invitation to deliver the presidential address in today's program. And on behalf of LJRF and on behalf of Mandava Science Foundation, I extend my warm welcome, ma'am, to this auspicious occasion. Next, I would like to welcome today's keynote speaker, Dr. C. Basavaraju, Senior Professor of Law, ex-Vice Chancellor in charge, and ex-Registrar, University of Mysore. He is a personality with academic profusion in multifarious academic areas and a human rights expert. We can't get a better person to be with us to gain inestimable perspectives. On behalf of LGR Trivandrum Chapter and Mandava Science Foundation, Bangalore, I wholeheartedly welcome Dr. C. Basavaraju sir to this bright occasion of Ambedkar Memorial Lecture Series. Welcome, sir. We had with us Mr. Daniel Prashant Sebastian sir in the 3 previous episodes of the Ambedkar Memorial Lecture Series representing the Mandava Science Foundation, Bangalore. But today we have Mr. N. Deepak Sharavanan, a new face, who has agreed to deliver the felicitation speech in today's program. He currently acts as the Director, Social Justice, MS of Bangalore. I'm looking forward to listen to his valuable outlook, as like each and everyone who are presented here. On behalf of LGR of Trivandrum Chapter, I cordially welcome you, sir, to the event. We also have Advocate G. Muralidharan, Secretary, Trivandrum Bar Association, former Trivandrum Advocates Cultural and Welfare Organization Secretary, and former Director of Trivandrum District Lawyers Cooperative Society, for another felicitation speech. It's our privilege to have an eminent personality with 25 years of experience in legal practice. I, on behalf of LGRF and Mandava Science Foundation, wholeheartedly welcomes you to the function, sir. Finally, I earnestly welcome all the LGRF state and district chapter office bearers, members of LGRF family, officials and members from Mandava Science Foundation, faculties, advocates, research scholars, other respectable dignitaries, students, and all those who are presented here with prime interest and spirit. I welcome you one and all. Thank you. And it is over to you, Sarath.
Thank you so much, sir. That's indeed a heartwarming welcome. With immense pleasure, I am deeply honored to invite Professor C. Basavaraju, Senior Professor of Law in University of Mysore. He was also the former Vice Chancellor, Registrar and Syndicate Member in the University of Mysore. By profession, Dr. C. Basavaraju is a law teacher known for his commitment, honesty, integrity, and dedication in his profession. He is a member of the Karnataka Bar Council, Bar Associations of Bangalore and Mysore. Amidst of all this, it's very evident that he was never forgotten his part to be a good human being. He is also associating with various non-governmental organizations for the cause of securing social justice to the vulnerable sections of the society and to promote national integration to the youth community. He was also awarded with the Yashasvi Sadhaka Award in 2011, Best Citizen of India Award in 2012, National Integration Award in 2015, and the RTI Awareness Award in the same year. It makes me highly delighted to invite such an honorable person to deliver the keynote address of our today's program. I welcome you, sir. Sorry, sir, you're muted. Could you please unmute?
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Good evening to one and all. Firstly, I wish you 75th Happy Independence Day to all of you. Let this 75th Independence Day brings pomp and heraldry and glory to our nation, great nation. Firstly, I thank the Law and Justice Research Foundation, Trivandrum chapter, and Mandava Science Foundation, Bangalore, for organizing this 75th India's Independence Day celebration under Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's Memorial Lecture Series 4. Today, in fact, I have been requested by Mr. Chindu Joseph and his colleagues to speak on the contribution of Dr. Ambedkar to the Indian Constitution. As you know that the contribution of Dr. Ambedkar to the Indian Constitution has been recognized as a vast area where Dr. Ambedkar's contribution cannot be pinpointed in a particular area. The whole Constitution of India, which is drafted by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as a chairman of the drafting committee and his other colleagues, is the foundation for certain constitutional values. If you look at the very basis of the Indian Constitution, it reflects the millions and millions of Indians who have fought for the freedom, who have fought for the independence of India, because many Indians, in fact, they have sacrificed their life for securing freedom from the various rulers, especially the British rulers. Though India wanted to have freedom from Britishers, yet at the same time, some sections of the society in India, they also wanted freedom from the exploitation, freedom from injustice, which was being perpetuated within the Indian society. See, therefore, today we have to remember those great people, our freedom fighters, who have really sacrificed their life to bring freedom for us. We are enjoying the freedom from the day of independence, August 15th, 1947, and especially from the day of the Constitution of India came into force, that is 26 January 1950. We have been enjoying full freedom. We have been enjoying all kinds of liberties. But at the same time, we should not forget the sacrifice done by our great freedom fighters. If they had not sacrificed their life for the sake of freedom, today we would not have been possible to enjoy the various rights given under the Constitution of India. See, therefore, since India is known for multicultural society, or we are living in a pluralistic society, we need to regulate certain social evils. Despite the fact that we have got independence, despite the fact that we have got freedom, and despite the fact that we have been liberated from outside rulers, but still millions and millions of people even today across the country in different sections of the society, they are suffering from exploitation. They are confronting with injustice. They are confronting with various social evils. Whether the independence what we have got on 15th August 1947 and subsequently the Constitution came into force have really reached the vulnerable sections of the society. Discrimination, exploitation, injustice, inequality, casteism, all these existed even before the independence. There are certain sections of the society, they had no voice to speak. They had no place to live. They were discriminated wherever they go. They were deprived of basic education. See, therefore, as a result of the Constitution came into being, and as a result of the spirit of the Constitution, which is reflected in the form of independence and the freedom, has given a recognition for various rights to the Indians. At the same time, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was the chairman of the drafting committee, was given the responsibility to frame the Constitution to the pluralistic society. Because our society is not a society which is having only one religion or one language or one culture. It is having innumerable languages, innumerable cultures, innumerable traditions, for which we wanted a perfect constitution in order to protect the interest of all kinds of people belonging to different religions, belonging to different cults, belonging to different ethnic groups. So therefore, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the chairman of the Constituent Assembly, he recognized Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's contribution, his scholarship, his erudition, and ultimately Dr. Ambedkar in fact was got elected as the chairman of the drafting committee. You might be surprised to know Dr. Ambedkar had already by that time studied various other constitutions of the world. For example, he had already studied the Constitution of America, the American Civil Liberties. He had already studied the Constitution of UK, that is unwritten Constitution, the Bill of Rights. He had already studied the Constitution of Australia, Constitution of Canada, Ireland. See, with the experience of all these constitution and also the knowledge of all these constitution, Dr. Ambedkar was able to give the best constitution to the India in order to secure freedom, in order to secure equality, to secure justice, to secure protection, safety to all people, irrespective of the religion, irrespective of the community, or irrespective of the caste, or even irrespective of the language, whatever it may be. See, therefore, we are not only glorifying and remembering the Constitution Day, that is 26 November 1950, January 1950, but also we have to remember August 15th, every year of August 15th. That is the foundation for further development of the Indian society by way of drafting the constitution, by way of forming various types of governments, by way of undertaking various economic programs for the economic prosperity of the nation. See, therefore, for the purpose of removal of all the social evils which exist in the society, the makers of the Indian Constitution, they have deliberately included certain objectives and certain ideals to the Indian Constitution. If we just look into the preamble of the Indian Constitution, that itself says that every citizen of this country should be ensured with social justice. Even before independence, even before we got independence, many sections of the society, they were deprived of justice, social justice. They were not allowed to enter into various public places, including temples, public resorts, or even they were not allowed to take water from the public wells. Likewise, they were deprived of economic justice. See, therefore, that was the situation, that was the society in which people were living with utter poverty. People were living with utter apprehension, and they had no security for their life. Dr. Ambedkar, for the first time, while drafting the Constitution of India, deliberately included the basic fundamental principles, fundamental doctrines which ensures safety, dignity, and some kind of protection to the certain vulnerable sections of the society in particular, and all sections of the society in general. If you look at the equality provision, every individual should be treated equally. That is the slogan of the Constitution. That is the fundamental principle of the Constitution. And therefore, certain fundamental rights were guaranteed to all the citizens of this country, irrespective of their religion, or irrespective of their economic status, or irrespective of the caste or community or whatever it may be. For example, freedom of speech and expression. Thousands and thousands of people had no voice to raise against the government. They have no voice to question the atrocities. They had no voice to question the exploitation, torture, humiliation, harassment penetrated on these people. For the first time, by insertion of a fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression, every citizen is guaranteed freedom of speech and expression. Today, irrespective of the economic status or irrespective of the religion, whether it is a Muslim or a Hindu or a Sikh or a Jain, or whether he is belong to a particular caste, community, irrespective of that, every citizen of this country is entitled, constitutionally entitled to speak, entitled to express his ideas, express his views. Suppose any exploitation takes place, he can raise his voice, he can fight for rights, he can fight for his human rights. See, that is the essence of the Constitution, which has given the fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression. We had a very bitter experience in the Indian society. Some sections of the society, they were not allowed to live in a particular place. They were prevented from living in the midst of the rest of the society. They were called as outcast. They were kept outside the mainstream of the society. And they were not allowed to live with the others. And for the first time, through the constitutional mandate of freedom of residence and settlement, every citizen shall have a fundamental right to reside and settle anywhere throughout the territory of India. No citizen, simply on the ground of caste or culture, simply on the ground of religion or race, shall not be prevented from residing in any place of his choice or settling in any place of his choice. This is how the constitutional mandate of freedom of residence and settlement has been recognized as a fundamental right. Earlier, certain sections of the society, they had no security to live with as a human being. They had no security. They were prevented from organizing themselves. They were threatened by some people not to assemble together, not to associate together, not to raise your voice and all that. And through the Constitution, fundamental right to freedom of assembly and freedom of association, today any citizen of this country can form an association for the purpose of securing justice, for the purpose of securing protection from exploitation or from any kind of harassment. Likewise, before the Constitution came into being, another important social evil was people, certain sections of the society, they were not allowed to perform certain profession. For example, some sections of the societies, they are treated only to do certain menial works. They were not allowed to undertake various other professions. For the first time, fundamental right to freedom of profession and freedom of occupation was recognized as a fundamental right under the Constitution of India. See, all these fundamental rights are recognized and guaranteed to citizens for the simple reason that our framers of the Constitution, they had a bitter experience. They had a bitter experience even before the Constitution came into force, how they were treated by the society, how the society in fact was polarized, how the society was discriminated, and as a result of which today fundamental rights have been recognized for every citizen of this country. But the question is, even after the Constitution came into force, we are completing 70 years of the Constitution came into force. Whether all these objectives, the preambular objectives of the Indian Constitution, like equality, because equality based on which the entire Constitution is built. The idea of equality, the idea of liberty, the idea of justice, and the idea of fraternity. These are all the four pillars on which the edifice of the Indian Constitution is built. Why Ambedkar and his colleagues, the members of the drafting committee and its chairman, they wanted to specifically include the equality doctrine. What is the reason? The reason was that thousands and thousands of people in the Indian society, they were not treated equally as a result of caste, as a result of religion, as a result of ethnic group. And therefore, the Constitution of India has abolished this performance of untouchability. Article 17 of the Indian Constitution, in fact, is one of the very powerful weapon, one of the powerful weapons in the hands of the people who are subjected to untouchability. Article 17, in fact, it provides that untouchability is abolished and performance of untouchability in any form is an offense. See, even after 70 years, we are talking about the discrimination, we are talking about inequality, we are talking about exploitation. But with our great freedom fighters, our freedom fighters like Mahatma Gandhi ji, Nehru, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Bhagat Singh, see, all these great freedom fighters, they fought for equality. They fought for freedom. They fought to secure dignity, human dignity to every individual. If you look at the past, even before the constitution came into force, what was the status of the Dalits? What was the status of the backward classes? What was the status of the marginalized groups, including women, children, physically handicapped, visually challenged persons? See, therefore, for the first time, the constitution, in fact, has guaranteed the equality to all. Any discrimination from any individual, any discrimination from any organization, any discrimination from any government will be dealt very seriously under the constitution. Therefore, constitution, in fact, has become a very strong mechanism or tool in the hands of the people of India in order to secure justice, equality, liberty, and fraternity. Millions and millions of people, in fact, they were not living as human beings because of various existing social evils. For example, for the first time, Constitution of India under Article 21 has ensured right to life. Right to life means right to live with human dignity. If individuals are not able to live as human beings, if individuals are subjected to inequality, subjected to animal treatment, subjected to indignities, then what kind of the freedom we have? What kind of a freedom we have got? See, therefore, when Dr. Ambedkar, when Mahatma Gandhiji, and some other leaders from backward classes, they were invited by the Britishers during the roundtable conferences, the demand was that, firstly, we want independence to India. Let India should be free from the Britishers. That was the first requirement. That was the first demand. The second demand was that after independence, let the marginalized sections of the society, the deprived classes of the people in India should also get freedom. See, that was the objective of the leaders of the minorities who represented in the roundtable conference. As a result of which, we got the constitution. In the constitution, the makers have incorporated all these fundamental rights, and especially fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression, fundamental right to life. Life is assured. Today, no individual's life can be taken away, can be distorted, can be subjected to exploitation without lawful justification. Without lawful justification. Today, no state or no government can damage or destroy the life of an individual. So therefore, today, the Constitution of India has ensured certain very important rights. Earlier, if a person is arrested, he was subjected to cruelty. He was subjected to inhuman treatment by the police. He was subjected to harassment. But after the constitution came into force, even the arrested persons were also, in fact, entitled to have certain rights. For example, if a person is arrested, once he is arrested, he shall be produced before the nearest magistrate within 24 hours, irrespective of the religion, irrespective of the caste, or irrespective of the culture, irrespective of the community, whoever may be the person, irrespective of the gender. Once a person is arrested, he shall be produced before the nearest magistrate. This is a constitutional mandate. And he shall be given an opportunity to consult a lawyer, because every individual has to protect his life. Every individual has to protect his life to live with human dignity. And as soon as a person is arrested, he shall be provided the reasons of his arrest. Millions and millions of people in this country, they are not aware of these constitutional requirements or constitutional safeguards given to the citizens of this country whenever they are subjected to detention or subjected to arrest. We have to remember today the effort made by our constitutional makers, our freedom fighters, their long-standing vision for securing justice, securing equality to the whole country, irrespective of the religion or irrespective of the caste, is a great achievement and a great development in the history of India. At the same time, today, if you look at the development of the Indian society right from 26th January 1950, from the day of Constitution came into force, till today, we have to retrospect ourselves or introspect ourselves whether the preambular objectives of the Indian Constitution, like equality, liberty, justice, fraternity, have been really achieved, or even the social welfare programs which were provided in the directive principle of the state policy, whether they have been achieved to the extent what our constitutional makers thought of. For example, one of the direct principle of the state policy says, state shall take with special care the interest of the social and educationally and economically backward classes of people. Whether the directive principle of the state policy, the objectives of the directive principle of the state policy have been fructified, have been fulfilled, even after 70 years of Constitution came into force. We have our doubts. We have yet to go a long way. Where exactly the fault lies? Why we have not achieved the objectives of the Indian Constitution even after a long gap of time? And why even after a long gap of 75 years of independence, many people even today, they are not living with freedom. They are living with fear and apprehension. Even today, some of the sections of the societies, they have no freedom at all. What kind of freedom we can think of? The women who are living in the rural areas, they are still subjected to exploitation. They are still subjected to humiliation. See, therefore, the real independence we got in the year 1947, August 15th, but more than that independence, we need to have independence to our women, our children, our vulnerable sections of the society, our people belonging to backward classes and marginalized sections of the society. See, as long as the marginalized sections of the societies get complete freedom, get complete economic resources, get complete sharing of the economic resources, only then there is an equality in this country. Today, only few sections of the society, they are becoming richer and richer. And the rest of the society, the poorer sections, they are becoming poorer and poorer. It is because of the uneven distribution of the natural wealth or nation's wealth. And there is one requirement of the directive principle of the state policy, that state must ensure the equal distribution of national wealth. It is not being done. And as a result of which the number of poorer people is increasing. So therefore, the real independence to the people of India, it comes only when all the people of India, they must live with peace and tranquility. They live with equality. They live without apprehension. They live without inequality, injustice, and exploitation. And of course, that was the object of the makers of the Indian Constitution. They said, we want to build an egalitarian type of society, because we are all living in a pluralistic society, but at the same time, we need to establish, or we need to create a egalitarian type of society, a society which is free from all kinds of exploitation, which is free from all kinds of discriminations. But we yet to achieve this kind of society, egalitarian type of society. And of course, let us all join together in one spirit to fight against all kinds of social evils. Let us all join together for building our nation with integrity, with integrity and with nationalism, the spirit of nationalism, the spirit of oneness, the spirit of brotherhood should be promoted by all, irrespective of the status of the economic status, irrespective of the religion, or irrespective of the community. See, only then we can think of that our India has achieved economic development, achieved social development, and achieved cultural development. For let us all strive to work towards for the development of our country, because in the past 7 years, in the past 10 years, we have been witnessing that lot of changes are taking place in India. So many changes are taking place in India. Large number of economic and welfare programs are being launched in order to address the poorer sections of the society. And therefore, unless and until all the directive principle of the state policies are implemented by the government, whatever may be the government, until all these are implemented, till such time we cannot achieve a real India. We cannot achieve the dream of Mahatma Gandhi ji, the dream of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, or the dream of our Subhash Chandra Bose in building one country, one nation, and also there must be integrity, honesty, and commitment from all citizens of this country. Then only our celebration of Independence Day every year on August 15th will be having a real meaning, and really all the people who are involved in these celebrations, in fact, they have to dedicate themselves for the cause of the development of this society. And I always say that we need a society, we need a knowledgeable society, and we need to create a knowledge society in which there shall not be any discrimination, polarization, exploitation, injustice, inequality. We need a society with non-discrimination. We need a society where there is an element of egalitarian element. And I hope that this August 15th Independence Day celebration, it gives a message to the society that since we are all Indians, right from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, we are all Indians. We are all, in fact, one and the same. And this the voice of oneness must be heralded to the entire nation at this juncture, in order to see that the constitutional mandates of equality, justice, liberty, and fraternity should be ensured to all in their life, and make everybody's life a meaningful and a dignified life. I wish you once again, the 75th Independence Day wishes to all of you who are participating in this celebration program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your highly enlightening words. We are indeed privileged to have you with us today. Thank you so much. Next, we have with us Dr. Sindhu Tulasidaran, Head of the Department of Law, who has 19 years of teaching experience in law and also a member in various academic bodies. Presently, she is a chairperson, member, faculty in Academic Council, and much more. With deepest respect, I welcome you, ma'am, to deliver the presidential address. I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Uttara. Respected Professor Basavaraju sir, respected Sri Muralidharan, dear coordinator of LJRF, Chintu Joseph, coordinators of Mandava Science Congress, then dear students and all participants. I have been listening to the speech of Professor Basavaraju, which has enlightened us much on this Independence Day. I too wish to confer on you the 75th Independence Day wishes at this juncture. What I want to talk about to you at this point of time is the vision of Ambedkar on social justice and democracy. I think that this should go hand in hand. What is social justice with respect to Indian democracy? And you all know that social justice is a relative concept because it will vary with the circumstances, isn't it? The determinants of social justice will vary with the circumstances. So what is required for achieving social justice is that individuals should be given full opportunity to develop their capacities. And the state shall ensure if all individuals are getting that opportunity, whether maximum number is enjoying that opportunity. So for that, the state shall have to remove all sorts of disabilities. As earlier speaker has pointed out, all disabilities with respect to caste, with respect to sex, then race, creed, religion, nationality. So what the state shall do is to provide opportunity in a positive way so as to develop the faculties of individuals for the sake of progress of the society. So that is what is meant by social justice in a general way. So where has this social justice been mentioned? What is the importance of this social justice? Our makers were very much concerned with social justice, particularly in a democracy like India. So we know that our constitution starts with the resolve by the people to make or to give for themselves a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to give to them and to secure to them justice, social, economic, and political. So there comes social justice. So what we require is justice, which is social, economic, and political. Where have we gone for political justice in a democracy? When we have attained freedom, we went for political democracy, where we never wish to install a permanent dictatorship in no manner whatsoever. So we went for a political democracy. So we don't want to stop with mere political democracy. We don't want the holders of political democracy to grab power and enjoy power. So what we wanted at that instance was that we will have to lay before them our ideal, which we considered as economic democracy. So when you say justice, social, economic, and political, we mean democracy as well. That is social, economic, and political democracy. Then where have we attained this economic democracy? And we haven't attained economic democracy fully through the fundamental rights and the basic principles that is embedded in the preamble. We have gone to, or we have embedded, or we have found all this in one of the most important directive principles, that is in Article 38, where the state was given a directive to strive to promote the welfare of the people and for securing and promoting as effectively as it can, as effectively as it can, a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political democracy can strive. So it is in that context where economic democracy gains importance. So it's for the state to establish a social order in which the principles of, the justice, in which the principles of justice, social, economic, and political shall inform all the institutions of national life. So this can strive only if it is informed very well, only if it is implemented properly. So that is where the, the duty of the state is vested to establish a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political shall inform all the institutions of national life. So that has to be laid before the people who had formed government, because they had to go with that. And we know that fundamentally, if we want to establish justice, social, economic, and political, we'll have to go back to the electorate, isn't it? So mostly we can say that ours is mostly a political democracy, because we still rely on one man, one vote. Because even though for establishing economic democracy, if we lay before the people our ideal of economic democracy, to establish a social order in which justice, in which justice, social, economic, and political can strive, the makers or the one who is in governance can do is to go ultimately to the electorate. So that is going back to one man, one vote itself, which is political democracy. So that's the concept of social justice and democracy. Whenever we want to establish, wherever we find the need for social justice, we'll have to go back to the people. So you can say that this is an attribute of popular will or the sovereignty of the people. It comes from the sovereignty or the will of the people. So where is vested the mandate for achieving social justice? So it lay with the people itself. So they will have to find out good persons to come to the assembly, good persons to come to the cabinet. Then only can we establish justice, social, economic, and political in a very effective way. So that is what is happening with respect to a constitution. So when Ambedkar was in assembly, when he was speaking about social justice, he asserted the word strive in the context of the directive principle. He held that the directive principle is more important than fundamental rights, and he asserted that the word strive should be used. That is, the state shall strive to establish a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political shall inform all the institutions of national life. Why has he asserted for such a word? Because he knows that blockades will come in, hurdles will come in. No government should go back saying that we are not in a position to achieve social justice. So what he wanted was that the government should not, should not be declined to, establish or to, absorb the norm of social justice and to establish social justice in governance. So that is what the word, when he said the word strive should be inserted, that is what he meant. Because we know that many hurdles will come. We say that the situation is not good now. The government can say that the situation is good now to implement the social order as is required as per Article 38 of the Constitution. It can also say that it's not fair because there are financial constraints. So they can go back saying that it's not a good situation, or else they can say that there are certain financial restraints, so we can't implement such a social order as is perceived under Article 38 of the Constitution. So he doesn't want the government to say that. So the word strive was mandatorily included in the article to make the government duty bound to establish such justice, that is justice, social, economic, and political in all walks of life, in all institutions, as to be informed to all institutions that such a justice shall be established. So next is equality of status and opportunity. We know we can call this principles of justice, liberty, and equality as the Trinity, because only if these three are achieved, that is, when we say we have equality of status and opportunity, we will also be achieving the liberty, isn't it? When we acquire the equality of status and opportunity, we will automatically be acquiring the liberty of freedom and expression and of belief, faith, and worship. And we will, then we will be leading to our, our position will be leading to justice, social, economic, and political automatically. So we can say these three principles as Trinity, and many things can be absolved through bringing in or achieving this Trinity. these three principles, that is justice, liberty, and equality. You know that what happened in S.R. Bommey case. In S.R. Bommey case, it was held that secularism was one of the basic features of the constitution. And it was also held that it is forming part of the basic structure. That's a preamble. The principle of secularism that was inserted in the preamble was forming part of the basic structure. So what was held was that this should be harmonized so as to achieve the trinity, that is equality of status and opportunity, and thereby leading to liberty, and thereby leading to justice. And with this trinity in operation, we can also say that along with dignity, a person can achieve the entire, the entire right to life concept in his days ahead. So if we have the right to equality, if we have the right to liberty, we'll naturally be achieving justice. Then we will also be achieving the dignity, which is a very basic part of individualism. And also we can go for fraternity, and thereby we can go for fraternity, which is very closest to democracy. Even we can call it as the very closest element of democracy. Once we have achieved justice, we can go for fraternity. It's a very closest element of democracy. When I say that, after democracy, we can go to unity and integrity of the nation. So that is how these principles were, listed and included in the preamble of the Constitution. Why has these principles been given so much importance? Because ours was a democracy. Ambedkar didn't go for a parliamentary democracy. He has actually went for a constitutional democracy where the entire principles of constitutionalism should be respected. That's why all these principles were given importance. Then if we can say, go to the Sabarimala verdict, since many of the principles have been explained by Basavaraju sir, I can inform you I can discuss with you some of the important judgments of the Supreme Court to make you aware of these principles. That is Sabarimala verdict. What happened in Sabarimala verdict? In Sabarimala verdict, the women were denied entry. The women in the age group 10 to 50 were barred from entering into the temple. They were banned entry into the temple. Under Kerala Hindu public places worship authorization of entry rules. So what happened was that through rules, these women were denied equality of status and opportunity as equally as that of man. A woman was denied equality equally as that of a man in the case of her entry into the temple, because she belonged to the age group 10 to 50. That's not a reasonable restriction, isn't it? That's not a reasonable classification. So that is actually affecting the equality of status and opportunity. And that is indeed affecting her, her right to right against untouchability. She's put to untouchability. She's put to the abuses of untouchability. If somebody is restricted from entry into temple, we can say that they are practicing untouchability. And also we can say she is denied a right to freedom of religion, isn't it? Once we have free conscience, we have the freedom to propagate, freedom to profess, propagate, and practice religion. We'll be enjoying a right to religion in full. But there she is denied a right to freedom of religion. And also she is ultimately denied a right to movement. Even you can say she is denied a movement to the temple. So her fundamental rights are denied, as well as a right to life. That is a part of her dignity. Right to live with that is right to live with dignity and with liberty. Her right to live with dignity and liberty is getting, affected by her ban to enter the temple. So what has happened here is that the court held that women should be given equality of status and opportunity in the case of entry of temple, and therefore this rule was held unconstitutional as per principles of Article 14. Article 14 says about equality before law and equal protection of law. When do you say that there is equality before law? Only if all are placed at the same level, we can say there is equality before law. Then only we can say all are provided equality, isn't it? So equality before law and equal protection. If one has to get equal protection, he has to be placed at par with others. So the first position to be achieved is equality before law. So to gain equality before law, the particular worshipper, the woman worshipper, has to be placed at par with the man worshipper, isn't it? The male worshipper. So once she is placed in equal status or in equal, if she is given equal opportunity, then she will get equal protection of law. So that is what is actually what is mandated by Article 14 of the Constitution. When we say equality before law, we mean equality. First of all, we mean equality before law. All are equals. All are to be made equals before law. Then only we can provide them equal protection. So there is an infringement of Article 14. The court found that there is an infringement of Article 14. Then Article 15, that is, there was prohibition on the basis of sex, isn't it? So there was a prohibition of there was an infringement of Article 15 due to violation of prohibition of discrimination on the basis of sex. Then there was also a matter of untouchability. That was also a matter of untouchability. So it was also a violation of Article 17. Then Article 21, her right to life, right to live with dignity and with personal liberty, that was also denied. And finally, her right to freedom of religion, that was also denied. So that was what happened in Sabarimala verdict. So when these principles, when I say liberty, equality, and justice is achieved, we can directly achieve the other fundamental tenets, isn't it? We are led to the other basic tenets of the Constitution. We can go for unity and integrity. And we say that a woman's right is violated when she is denied a right. Actually, her peace, progress, and development is harnessed, isn't it? It is blocked. And thereby what happened is that the development of the society in turn is getting affected, isn't it? When a woman's progress is blocked, when a right to live with peace is, is affected, when a right to, when a right to life, when a right to live with peace, progress, and through that her development is affected, that is in turn affecting the development of the society. So whenever violation takes place in any manner, any sort of discrimination can affect the right to life, liberty, equality, security, then right against exploitation, and ultimately right to life of a person. So that has to be prevented. And so all these principles inserted into our Constitution, and Ambedkar stood for that. When I said that all are to be considered, first of all, what we require is equality before the law. What he said is that when we go for positive actions, we call it affirmative action. When we go for affirmative action, what we require is that, first of all, those who have not still entered into the public sphere has to be brought up, isn't it? Has to be uplifted. So that is what is happening in the case of reservation. So those who have not attended public services, they have to be brought in first into the public services through giving them reservation. Then only we can say that they have achieved equal protection of law. So first of all, what we require is equality before law. Then only we can enjoy equal protection of law. So reservation is permissible under law because of that reason. What is affected is our right to equality. That is, equality before law is affected because we are denied of an opportunity to enter into public services. So those communities who were denied of the opportunity to enter into public services were first of all given reservation, and they were uplifted at par with the other community, uplifted and brought at par with the other communities. And thereafter, the law was applied and they were given, provided with equality. So that is what is happening, what we have seen in Shaira Banu case. In Shaira Banu case, the triple talaq, which was irrevocable and instantaneous, was held to be violative of all these elements, isn't it? Or a man can promulgate triple talaq. Why can't a woman be made to suffer? So personal laws are conferring inferior status upon woman and thereby violating all fundamental rights that she should enjoy under the Constitution. So that is what happened in triple talaq case. A man promulgating instantaneously talaq 3 times, a woman is left destitute. So woman is denied all her rights, all her fundamental, her right to life. Then there also she is denied of her right to equality, where a man has such a right under the right to promulgate triple talaq, offer triple talaq. The woman is not given unequal, what do you say, unequal status, isn't it, as that of a man. So whenever she is ousted out of the marital relationship, she is not getting any remedy. So what has happened is that the Muslim women right on marriage act was passed as a consequence of this decision, because here her right to equality was seen affected, her right to prohibition of discrimination on the basis of her prohibition of discrimination on the basis of sex was seen affected, her right untouchability, then her right to life was seen affected in the Article 21, her right under 25 was seen affected, where she was unable to profess her religion in accordance with the Shariat law. So application of Shariat law 1937 Act is there. As per Shariat law 2, that is, as per the cultural rights too, triple talaq is violative. So that was also seen affected. That is under Article 29. So, and under 26, the Muslim community was prevented from blocking the man, from stopping the man from promulgating triple talaq. So 26(1) was also seen affected. So these are the different provisions that are denying woman, or we can say any person of her or his fundamental rights that is inscribed in the preamble and in the other basic principles of the Constitution. So we'll have to see whether all these are met with. Then only we can say we have achieved equality, or we have achieved the full freedom, social justice. That's what I said. Social justice encompasses economic democracy and social democracy. And for that, we'll have to go for the, what do you say, ultimately, what we can understand is that we are ultimately going to one man, one vote scenario. So for achieving all these objectives, to promulgate suitable, to enact suitable legislations, we'll have to go back to political democracy. So we have political democracy, but to achieve social justice, no type of polity is mentioned clearly in the Constitution. It's not mentioned specifically, because the Constitution never says that for achieving social justice, such and such polity is required, or such and such form of government is required. That's not mentioned in our Constitution. So what we require is to make our government, or the government one who is in governance about our fundamental rights, and then make them understand what is happening and enact law and put it into practice, implement it suitably. So that is what happened in Shaira Banu case. And when I say gender neutral, when I say gender equality, it's also a facet of right to equality. We have very recently gone to the lesbian, bisexual, transgender rights, queer community, queer, intersexual, then asexual community right, that is LGBTQAI plus rights. So when we go to those community, we can say that gender neutral stand is not taken in the case of transgenders, lesbians, gay, queer people like groups. When heterosexuals are allowed to live as couples, these people are not allowed to live. Society is still has not yet changed, isn't it? So their state has to take step. So there comes the importance of social justice, where state has to secure for promoting the welfare of the people, social order, so as to facilitate justice, social, economic, and political, and to inform all institutions of the mandate, all institutions of national life as to observe the mandate. So all these institutions are to be, mandated to observe justice, social, economic, and political. Then only can we protect the rights of such communities like LGBTQAI groups, then like minorities, as I have said, Muslim community, then about the reservation that we are enjoying now. We can say that in Indira Sani case, the creamy layer concept came, but later the court has accepted many other principles like carry forward rule, the seniority in promotion, that is seniority in promotion, reservation in promotion, consequential seniority rule has been accepted by the court. The court held that it's not at all a denial of equality, because that can be given provided it's not violating the quota. Only if it exceeds the quota, that can be held to be violative of right to equality. So all these are giving us the vision that social justice has to be maintained, and it has to be suitably maintained irrespective of the system of government. Since we have a democracy, every time we can go back to the mandate of political democracy, that is one man, one vote, where we can say that the directive principle actually derives its power from the popular will or the sovereignty, the popular sovereignty. So there comes the importance of constitutional democracy in India. And Ambedkar has really gone for constitutional democracy. It's not parliamentary democracy as in Britain that we have envisaged for. So with these words, I conclude my speech, and I'm sure that you'll be going into more aspects regarding social justice. You can definitely go into this. Will be a lead for you to go into further aspects on social justice and Indian democracy. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Your words were really valuable. Thank you so much for your words. Up next for the felicitation ceremony, at first we have with us Sri N. Deebak Sharavanan, Director, Mandava Science Foundation, Bangalore. He is an enthusiastic and creative teacher who is passionate about the work he does. He strives to use current and scientifically proven methods to make his lectures more exciting and promote student-centric learning. I wholeheartedly welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Thank you. I have turned my camera on, but there seems to be some problem with my computer, so it may take some time to start. However, let me begin my presentation now. I, thank the, organizers for inviting me to deliver this speech. And I feel, it is a real privilege to be present on the same platform as, my fellow members here. Professor Dr. C. Basavaraju and Professor Sindhu and Muralidharan sir. It is a privilege to be on the board with you, and it is also a great opportunity. Of course, today is the Independence Day, and it is a great opportunity for me to meet all of you here, lawyers, and deliver this speech. People who are experts in law, people who study about social justice, people who study about other concerns, the legal aspects of our country. So I thank all of you for being here, and my presentation or my speech is going to focus on the narratives that surround Ambedkar's contribution to the Constitution. Because I come from a field which is a very different field from the field that you people are in. Law is something that is where you interpret, you analyze, you have the Constitution to follow, you have the other provisions, legal provisions to follow. But here, as a teacher of English, I'm used to narratives. I'm used to looking at Ambedkar and other personalities of our country through that lens. And his contribution, I would say, is very invaluable, as we have already seen, as our speakers have mentioned before. His contribution to not just law but also to social justice and to other important aspects of Indian public life is something that is invaluable, and we cannot deny the fact that he is to be considered as one of the founding fathers of our nation. Right? We have both founding fathers and mothers, and he is to be considered as one of the founding fathers of our nation because he has been instrumental in shaping the nation as it is today. So I would like to narrate a story first. This is a story that does not have anything to do with Ambedkar. In fact, this is a story that whenever you talk about law, this is a story that comes to the mind of people who are in literature, right? And people who have the habit of reading and who love literature. And if they have read English literature, I'm sure there are others who follow other literatures, as in you have the regional language literatures and things like that. But there are people who follow English literature, and this is a translated book in English. This is a German translation, and the book, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. is called The Trial by Franz Kafka. Now, this is a book which talks about a man who is being arrested, as in right at the beginning. The author tells us that this man is arrested and he is going to be in prison. That's what the police tell him, but we don't get to know why, or we don't get to know what are the charges until the end of the story, right? Even when the story ends, the story has a very abrupt ending. Primarily, this could, many people ascribe this to two reasons. One, Kafka passed away before he could complete the manuscript, and the second reason is that many people say this is a deliberate choice that Kafka made. He wanted to leave the ending abrupt, right? And he wanted to not have a very clear ending. Now, why did I mention about this? Because in India, right, and many of my fellow speakers who have mentioned this about social justice and other important aspects of public life, I did talk about that. So in India, if we have a sense of social justice, and if we have a sense of equality and other things, we should owe it to Ambedkar and the constitutional committee members. Now, we see that Ambedkar, being a person from a poor and also, a background which is a very, today we don't discuss much about Ambedkar's history. Of course, we know the person, but we don't know the how did he become this kind of a personality. Not many of us bother about learning about Ambedkar, or to try and see where Ambedkar comes from. What are the events that have shaped Ambedkar? Even the best of people, best of scholars who have a lot to say about Ambedkar and who have a lot to comment on Ambedkar's contribution to a lot of other fields, very often fail to recognize, that is very often fail to kind of read many of his writings. And I this is, I think I would be doing a favor or service here, or I shouldn't say favor, but a service to the students here, who are present here. I'm sure there are erudite scholars. They would have certainly read the books of Ambedkar. But to the students who are getting to know Ambedkar's contribution for the first time, I thought this might be an opportunity to introduce them to Ambedkar's writings. I would start with two books. That is, I would just like to touch upon two books, which at least to me are important books, because one, in one book, it's a very autobiographical book. Of course, he does talk about other people's lives as well. But this book, Waiting for a Visa, it is published under this title, Waiting for a Visa, but where he talks about his experience as a young kid, right, going to meet his father, who was posted in Koregaon, Satara, right? In Satara district, there is a village, and a young Ambedkar, he was just 10 then, and he has his brother who travels along with him. And Ambedkar and his family, they go to meet his father, because his father is located somewhere. And he was not aware that of the lot, he was aware that the world would treat him that way, mistreat him, but he was not aware of the conditions, the social conditions that existed outside his city. Of course, he was brought up in outside his village. Of course, he was brought up in a very good family setting, but he has had his own ups and downs, in the sense that he has faced the discrimination that people did show. Now, did practice. So so when he traveled, this was the first time that he traveled alone with his brother, and that was the time when he gets to experience discrimination firsthand. And this experience of a bullock cart driver abandoning them, or not being able to drink water from a public pipe, those kind of things, public tap and those kind of things, right? These things have had a huge impact on Ambedkar, and that, I think, has contributed to the shaping of the person that he later became. And that, I think, has also contributed to the kind of laws that we see, or the articles that we see in the Constitution. And as many of my fellow speakers mentioned, the article that deals with equality and the idea of equality, right? The three French ideals, we have equality, fraternity, and liberty, equality, and fraternity. So here, we need to understand that here was a setup, here was a social setup where people were being discriminated on the basis of caste. But it was not just caste. You had so many other factors that were there. Of course, caste played an important role, there is no denying it. And we need to understand that um, in today's context, when we discuss caste, it is always seen in the light of reservations, and it is always seen through the lens of reservation. And in many institutions, in many campuses, in many colleges, students, when they are introduced to caste system in India, or when they are introduced to the idea of caste as discussed by Ambedkar, or any of the other luminaries, they are not able to connect with this idea. But when it comes to, say, African American literature, there again we are talking about discrimination. There again we are talking about some sort of a racial prejudice that is there against certain groups, certain ethnicities, certain again biological factors determine their position in society. But in such a scenario, we tend to kind of turn a blind eye to the issues that are around us, primarily because today it seems to us, at least people who live in the cities, and people coming from the privileged backgrounds, it seems as if you know caste is something that existed only in the ancient times, or or the injustices that we talk about so often are things that exist only somewhere else, and they're not around us, they're not immediately next to us. But I think that is a very wrong way to approach the idea of social justice, equality, equity, all of those concepts. The reason being, this is something that we see in the constitution, this is something that we see in the writings of Ambedkar. So we see that he has experienced it firsthand. He has experienced his the discrimination and the kind of injustices that were perpetrated against the Dalits and the other communities firsthand, and hence Ambedkar took it upon himself to uh, deliberate with the other members of the Constitutional Assembly, and to argue for a constitution, to come up with a constitution that could last for ages, and that could also of course, when he wrote the constitution, when the constitution makers drafted the constitution, they were not people who wanted themselves to be considered as the final word or the final authority on everything. Of course, that is the reason why we have the amendments, the provision for amendments, constitutional amendments. So I'm sure these experiences have contributed in making Ambedkar who he is, and these experiences have contributed in Ambedkar drafting the constitution the way it is today. The next experience that I wanted to refer to, or the next writing that I wanted to refer to, is called "Who Were the Shudras." This is again a very controversial book, which was published, during Ambedkar's lifetime, and this was also something that was not initially, as in this was a speech that he had prepared to deliver in one of the meetings, and he was not allowed to present this because the content was deemed to be too controversial. But Who Are the Shudras, was published as a book, and he has again done erudite, research work there. He, gives Sanskrit slokas in Sanskrit, and also, has an appendix where he has given the translations. He has at least, mentioned the words and given the glossary of those words and all that. He does that so that people can understand where discrimination, or where these things come from. Now we see that today we have a constitution which is a very secular constitution. We say India is a secular country, and the constitution, secularism is one of the important factors. So I think what India is today, it is so for the people who follow a particular religion. There are religious tenets, there are religious books to follow, any religion for that matter. There are certain religious spiritual books to follow. But then, as citizens of this country, I think if I were to summarize, if I was asked to summarize, what my fellow speakers have, spoken on, and what is it that that most of our scholars would say, that I think I may take the liberty and summarize it as this. That is, the Constitution of India is not just a book. It's not just a printed material, a document, a living document, perhaps, but then it is also a spiritual book, in the sense that it is something of a commandment, right? It is something of but it is not a commandment that cannot be broken. It is a commandment that could be amended, but it is also something that should lead us and be worthy of, as in the Constitution of India, that is, make us become good citizens. And good citizenry is what the Constitution tries to achieve here, by way of making the society open to everyone, by way of making the society inclusive, by way of making our natural resources available to the countless number of people in our country, that is, to all the from people from all walks of life, and provide dignity, right? And to let people live with dignity. These are the important tenets of this document, I would say. And this comes from Ambedkar's own personal experience. So I would like to quickly conclude my speech with with facts from a from an article that I came across quite recently. It was interesting to note that the Constitution of India, when they were forming the Constitution Committee, the Constituent Assembly, right, and the draft Constitution Drafting Committee and all that, they had this doubt. Would it be possible for Indians to come up with their own constitution? Would it be possible for Indians to draft a constitution that could cater to the diversity that is there, right? Because there is so much diversity, people belonging to different ethnicities, different groups, different genders, right? And all of those, as in you need to cater to a vast section of society. Uh, a document that would be seen, and that would be, as in seen in the same light and followed with the same reverence by all the people involved, all the stakeholders of the Constitution. So how do we do it now? When they had this doubt, they thought it would be best to leave this job to the experts. Why not invite somebody from abroad? Perhaps we could invite a professor from UK, USA. Why can't we include them in the Constitution Drafting Committee? Or perhaps they could comment at least on the drafting of the Constitution. So they thought, they would probably call this, vice chancellor of University of Ceylon. His name was Sir Ivor Jennings. But ultimately, the job went to, the Indians, and the board was, the committee was headed by, our own Dr. Ambedkar. And when this happened, the Constitution then, was accepted. And later, when Ivor Jennings was in India, he delivered, these lectures in University of Madras in the year 1951. And these lectures were supposed to be lectures on, the Indian Constitution of India. There, coincidentally, we had another, member of the Constitution Drafting Committee, Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer. He was there, and he listened to the lecture, very intently, and took notes for the 3 days of the lecture, as in 3 lectures over 3 days. So, in summation, this was his observation. He said, the Constitution, that is, Ivor Jennings said, he made this comment in summation. He says this. He says the Constitution of India may not, endure. That is, it may not, sustain for a very long time, because it is too long, too rigid, and too prolix. That is, it is too, lengthy, and too rigid and too long. How are you going to have a constitution like this? Now, Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer was, heartbroken to hear this, but he wanted to kind of, ensure that he gets back at him by way of writing articles. So he started writing these articles on, why the Indian Constitution is a very good constitution, and why, you cannot deny the fact that the Indian Constitution is, something that can endure the test of time. But what happened was this: as in, already Krishnaswamy Iyer, passed away while he was writing these articles, the series of articles. And what happened later is that we see that the constitution of our country has survived to this day, and the predictions of this man, Sir River Jennings, seems to have failed, and that is actually a success. Now, why would I quote this particular incident in history? Because our constitution is, if it has survived this, there are people who have done their research on, the constitution of the world, different constitutions of the world. And there is this one research paper, which was published, or the study published by, University of Chicago, right? The university where, yeah, our own Dr. Ambedkar studied, I think. Yes. So the paper is this: the lifespan of written constitutions by Thomas Ginsburg, Zachary Elkins, and John Milton. Right? Sorry, James Milton. They say they analyzed constitutions from 1789 to 2006. From the time when America became an independent country, that was in the 1770s, and then till now, right, 1789, of course, yes, to 2006. And they identified that there are 792 new constitutional systems that are there. 792 different constitutional systems, of which 518 have been replaced, 192 still in force, 82 have been formally suspended, because they're either replaced or they're suspended, right? So as you can see, as the study concludes, constitutions don't last very long, and the mean lifespan, right, the mean lifespan of a constitution is merely 17 years. But our constitution, having survived the test of time, is still in existence, and that itself is a fact, to be happy and to be proud of, right? The estimates show that one half of constitutions are likely to be dead by their age 18. That is, by the time the constitution turns 18, they're dead. Or by the time the constitution is 50, only 19% of them survive. And a large percentage, approximately 7%, do not even make to their second birthday. So that means a constitution is created and it fails. They have to replace it. So there are countries that have done that, but here we have gathered here to meditate on the fact that Ambedkar contributed to not just Indian independence, but setting the way for what modern India is going to be, or what modern India was to be in the coming decades, in the coming centuries even, right? And that, I think, was Ambedkar's contribution, and that, I think, is his life work. And that is the reason why we see that Ambedkar, of course, he was a prolific writer, he was an erudite scholar, he wrote quite a few books. But wherever you come across Ambedkar's statue, you always see him holding the Constitution of India. He is known for the Constitution of India, and not any of his other books. Of course, he is known for several books that could be discussed some other time. Annihilation of Caste, you have Who Are the Shudras, I just mentioned that. There are his books on economy as well. But then we know him as the chief architect of Indian Constitution, right? And we could go to the extent of saying he is the father of Indian Constitution, if I may use that epithet. So with this, I would like to conclude my speech. I would like to just say this, that is, Ambedkar was not just someone who was against the caste system, was not just a good statesman, or was his contribution, of course, Constitution of India is his contribution. But today, if I were to, if I were to ask you to take one thing from Ambedkar, what would that one thing that we could all remember easily, and we could all try to be and try to do, is this? I think the Constitution could be a document which may not want us to agitate, but as Ambedkar had in his motto for this particular organization that he started, the Bahishkriti Hitakarani Sabha, he says, educate, organize, and agitate. So I think we should educate. We should educate our fellow citizens. We should organize, and we should agitate when things go wrong, when things are done against the constitution, when unconstitutional activities are performed. Right. So I think I will end my speech with that. Thank you for giving me an opportunity. Thank you for everybody who is present here for being patient listeners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Your words were highly relevant in our current social scenario. Thank you so much. We also have with us the most respected Trivandrum Bar Association Secretary, Advocate G. Muralidharan, who was also the former director of the Trivandrum District Lawyers Cooperative Society. He has been serving as the secretary of the Trivandrum Bar Association for the second time. He is also an experienced lawyer with 25 years of experience in legal practice. I welcome you, sir.
Respected Professor Basavaraja and my friend Dr. Sindhu Muralidharan and Sri Deepak Charavan, Sri Chindu Joseph and Advocate Neelima and respected participants. I wish happy independence to all. First of all, I extend my sincere thanks to the organizers, especially Mr. Safi Mohan, Assistant Professor, Government Law College, Trivandrum, and founder of LJRF, for inviting me to participate in this function. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. There is no better ways to be shared in the evening where we celebrate India's 75th Independence Day. I would like to take a moment to appreciate the initiative put forward by the Law and Justice Research Foundation in collaboration with Mandava Science Foundation to recognize the contribution of Dr. Ambedkar to the Constitution of India. This discourse on the role of Dr. Ambedkar in framing India's constitutional architecture even after 74 hours of the drafting process manifests the grandeur and glory of the social documents. The idea of constitutional morality by Dr. Ambedkar has been regarded as a paramount reference for the Constitution. Constitutional morality as a governing ideal highlights the need to prepare the trust of the people in the institutions of democracy. It promotes effective coordination between conflicting interests of different people. Dr. Ambedkar wisely provided constitutional guarantees and protection to individual citizens for a wide range of civil liberties, including freedom of religion and the abolition of untouchability. Extensive economic and social rights for women, emphasis on religious, gender and caste equality, and the recommendation to adopt the Uniform Civil Code stands out of his finest contributions. Apart from Dr. Ambedkar's legacy as a socio-political reformer, his role as a lawyer is an absolute honor for our legal fraternity. With a reminder not that the achievement we celebrate is what an opening opportunity to the greater times that await us. I conclude my words. Thank you again for all.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. Nothing is complete without showing gratitude. I now invite Advocate Neelima V. Naya, Joint Secretary LJRF Trivandrum Chapter, to deliver the vote of thanks. I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Uttara. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
A very warm good evening to one and all. Wishing you a very happy Independence Day. So we have reached the end of the session of the fourth webinar conducted by LJRF Trivandrum Chapter in collaboration with Mandava Science Foundation, Bangalore, as a part of the Dr. Ambedkar Memorial Lecture Series. I consider it is a great privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. First of all, on behalf of the entire fraternity of LGRF, I extend a heartfelt gratitude towards Professor C. Basavaraju for gracing the occasion with your presence and wonderful speech. Thank you very much, sir. Next, I would like to express our profound gratitude towards Dr. Sindhu Tulasidaran. Thank you, madam, for your enlightening speech. Next, I would like to acknowledge our deepest gratitude towards Sri N. Deepak Sharavanan and Advocate G. Muralidharan for your esteemed presence and inspiring words. Thank you very much. And next, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our beloved mentor Safi Mohan sir and also Advocate Shindu Joseph, President LGRF Trivandrum Chapter, and Uttara, our dear comparer and active member of Trivandrum Chapter. And next, I thank the members of Mandava Science Foundation and each and every member of LGRF who has given their time and effort for making this event a success. Finally, I express a wholehearted appreciation to all the participants of this webinar. Thank you very much for your cooperation, and once again, I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your amazing words. It was indeed heart-pleasing one. Now that we have come to an end of our today's session, I request each and every one of you to pay a moment of respect to our national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thanking each and everyone here today, and I now declare today's webinar officially over. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.